Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. How are you? What's new?
Doing good. Doing good. Not much. We just talked the other day, so not a whole lot's changed since then. We're trying to catch up. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we're trying to catch up with our travel schedules and things. We try and record a couple times a week to get ahead so that when we are traveling abroad, we can sort of still have a bunch in the can. So we see each other a couple times a week, a few times a week, and this is always fun. And our last episode, we covered a lot of the pelvic anatomy and the SI joint primarily. And today we're going to be expanding on that.
So with that in mind, a couple things first before we start. Just so you guys know, keep an eye on our Instagram and such, because we have some not live. We have some live recorded events. There we go. Live online events coming up. And one with Bounce Body and one with Level Up Movement. So keep an eye on that. I'll be traveling for some advanced movement principles work in Raleigh and Charleston. And then Brian is going to be going to, I think, Korea in January. If all
actually China, hopefully
China in January.
Hopefully China in January. And we're still trying to work at when Korea is going to happen. Probably March-ish is what we're looking at. So not exactly sure, but yes, November 8th, we're going to be doing the integrated movement specialist with Balanced Body. It's going to be 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And that is on November 8th, where we're going to be talking about, why don't you?
Enhancing personal training with Pilates.
Yes.
So our approach to that is going to be basically taking some functional movement patterns, very simple ones, basic ones that everybody uses and everybody needs all the time. And then looking at how you develop those using Pilates for certain aspects of it and personal training for certain other aspects of it. And just helping you guys understand where the two disciplines fit together and how you can use them in a coordinated fashion to really improve your clients' performance and ultimately their functional abilities.
Yep. Absolutely. That's going to be a lot of fun because, I mean, you and I have both taught in both realms, and it's always neat to sort of see the other side, their eyes sort of widen when you show them things that they've never seen before. Because when I teach at Pilates on tour, I will use the Pilates equipment, but a lot of times I'll teach a lot of other things and they'll be like, oh, wow, I never thought of doing it that way. So it really opens their eyes. And the same thing I'm sure you've seen when you've taught personal trainers and shown them some Pilates stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. So it's really an introduction for both sides to sort of bridge the aisle and say, hey, it's all about movement. That's really what we're talking about here. It's just how the body moves. And whether you load it with a spring or a cable or a band or whatever you use, it's just providing resistance to movement.
Right. And with their ultimate goal of really improving their functional movement capabilities and improving their ability to live their life or to do their sport or to pick up their grandkids, like whatever their goals are. I mean, that's always our goal. And I think there's really nice things that both disciplines have to offer in terms of really getting clients to their best self, their best moving self.
Yep. And on November 17th, from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be doing something for Level Up Movement, which is, again, a Don't Risk Your Discs series, which we've been working with them on in the past. And this time it's going to be a deep dive into sciatic pain, the sciatica. So talking about what it is, what it isn't, more importantly, and, trying to dive into that and figure out what you can do to help with that, depending on what the root cause is. So yeah, we should have a lot of fun with that. Doors open the 27th. So by the time this drops, you should be able to go to Level Up Movement. It's in the show notes. So however you get your podcast, go into the show notes. You can click on the links there. They're already there. And also check out all of our social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, Moving Convos, Moving Conversations. You're going to be able to find all this information there as well. And as always, hit the like and subscribe button so that each week when a new episode drops, it'll be right there in your inbox, and you can listen to it at your leisure.
All right.
All right.
So with that in mind, we are ready to dive into the sacroiliac joint. Last week, or last episode, we did a lot about the anatomy, kind of the structure, form closure, force closure, the challenges of stabilizing the sacroiliac joint, and the fact that you kind of have to stabilize it indirectly by stabilizing the entire lumbopelvic hip thigh complex, basically.
Yes.
Right. You kind of got to work from really the torso all the way through to the knees, at least, to create balanced forces moving through the bones, moving through the joints, and hopefully with time, eventually stabilizing that area.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, is trying to create the stability and what has worked for us in the past. And again, we're two people and we've got a lot of experience, but this is one of those things that I think both of us have scratched our head at, because no two people are alike when it comes to SI joint dysfunction. And what works for one, you think, I got it, I solved it, I have it, yes. And then the next person comes in and that doesn't work. You're like, oh, it's back to the square one.
Yeah.
And everybody is a little different. So today we're just going to talk about some strategies that we've used in the past and what has worked on various people. Again, not everybody does it work on. There's no one size fits all option when it comes to SI joint pain.
Yeah.
But this may give you a little bit of an idea going, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. Oh, I haven't tried that. Or if it's your own body, it may give you something, a little bit of hope that, oh, this might help. Let me give it a try.
In many ways, we're giving you options or paths to follow, because I often find that it's you kind of got to follow a path for a bit sometimes to figure out, A, is it working, or B, does that path succeed and then lead you to the next path?
Yes.
Right, because it's really, I find this is a very layered approach typically when I'm working with clients with this issue. So one thing that I want to bring up. It's going to be a little bit of a shotgun approach here. A lot of things are going to come out. One of the things that I work with a lot or think about a lot is that I need, I look at what are the compensations that are caused by the instability. Okay, so first of all, if the SI joints are both stable, there's usually not a problem. Right, that's kind of what we're looking at. And very commonly, the issue, if there is an SI joint dysfunction, is that one is stable and one is not. Right, so it's usually an asymmetry on the two sides, that one is just more stable than the other. And just to reiterate a little bit from last time, that instability means that, like, all the muscles from the pelvis down and many of the muscles from the pelvis up, so abdominal muscles, torso muscles, back muscles, hip muscles of all kinds, all of those are trying to do their best to stabilize that joint. So that's why I want to mention some of the compensations that I see. So the areas that I find are most commonly involved in trying to stabilize that joint, not successfully, mind you, but trying, is the piriformis.
Yes.
I often find that piriformis syndrome, an over-tight piriformis, that can sometimes put pressure on the sciatic nerve, leading to sciatica. So that can be one cause of that. Is one muscle that seems to get super tight when the SI joint is unstable. Other areas are, like, I find the whole lateral system of the leg. So the tensor fasciae lata, the IT band, maybe the lateral hamstring, even down with one of my clients down into the peroneals and down into the whole lateral calf and gastroc even. So kind of that whole lateral leg is like trying to stabilize that SI joint. Other clients, it really feeds up into their torso, or it can do both, where their anterior and posterior oblique sling, kind of their whole core, their abdominals get very imbalanced because one of them is trying to hold that pelvis in place. Either, like, let's say the anterior sling from the left shoulder to the right hip, and then the posterior sling, or maybe the posterior sling from the left shoulder to the right hip, get tightened up, trying to hold that pelvis in place. So the reason I bring all that complexity up is because oftentimes it is through recognizing or identifying what is compensating that I have a clue into where to focus my training for to balance out those compensations or to work in a different way.
Yeah. What I also try and look at is not only the compensations, but I try and look at what are they doing? What could be causing this, first of all? Because
Yeah.
sometimes there can be a myriad of reasons, but are they doing something habitually?
Yep.
The way they're sitting. I have here in Washington, D.C., I've seen a lot of therapists, and almost all of them are right handed. They'll cross their left knee over their right knee, rotate their body to the left, and right on that knee with their right hand. Well, chronically doing that over and over and over again for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, has created an imbalance. And we can see sometimes that just correcting that habit can begin to minimize some of the instability. Or it could be for whatever it is. Some people will cross one leg over another. Some people stand with one hip shifted out to the side, especially, I've had some people whose kids are grown and in college, but they always carried their child on their left hip and they always stand with their hips slung out to the side. So sometimes just doing something habitually can lead to some of that SI joint uh, imbalance and instability. So sometimes just becoming mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had an employee who, after her second child, suffered from a lot of SI joint instability. And she was a former athlete and had never had back problems before, but all of a sudden she did. And she had very long legs. She was a former volleyball player. And what I noticed was when she stood, she had what we sort of joked as the sexy pose, because one hip was always slung out to the side, always. So I found these little snowballs. They were basically puffs that weighed nothing. And I would keep them around. And every time I would see her on the floor stand like that, I'd throw it at her. And is it a little negative reinforcement? Yes, we were playful. We were having some fun. But I got to tell you, after a couple of weeks, she said it made her very mindful that all of a sudden I'd look over and she was standing on both feet evenly. And it was just that mindfulness, because when we're focused on something else, we can't always be mindful of where's our body in space.
Right. Yep.
But just having that mindfulness really helped with that. And I find that if I remind people and say, look, set an alarm on your watch if your job is something standing every 15 minutes or so. If it goes off, how are you standing? Are you balanced on both feet? Do you have one hip slung out? Something small like that, and just making that awareness of where their hips and their pelvis is in space can make a huge difference.
So one of the clients I've been working with lately, this gets to I think, kind of the key point here, which is understanding how you are holding your spine, your pelvis, and your hips and your
Yeah.
legs. Like that really is oftentimes the key to really changing this over time, is changing those habits.
Yeah.
I think about one of my, an old friend of mine who drove, and he drove this big old truck, and he always shifted it was on his left sit bone and had his hand on top of the wheel, and actually to his right sit bone, and basically shifted his ribs to the right and his arm
Yeah.
to the left. And that's how he drove all the time. And I suppose he grew up in the country, and I think it came from being like a cool guy at that point. But it was just so distorted. And he would drive. He had long distances to drive. He was a big commuter, and it's like, okay, so let's change that.
Yep.
I'm working with another client who has kind of set me out. This is part of why the SI joint is at the topic of these last couple of sessions, because I've really been working with this one client and getting some, what I think of as interesting new insights for me into the SI joint and how to stabilize it. And one of the things that she said and she found was, if she really thinks about keeping her sit bones together, right, as opposed to letting them kind of like spread. So almost that feeling of just a little pelvic floor engagement in her case, that makes all the difference for her.
Sure.
Right. And but the thing is keeping it there when she's standing, when she's sitting, when she's doing a lunge. So the challenge there for her is anytime the legs are not bilaterally symmetrical, like in a squat, but she's trying to do like a, walking lunge, something like that, that's where she can't keep it together.
Yep.
And that relates directly to walking, right? Because
Yep.
walking is, you've got that slight asymmetry going on. So, so thinking about awareness, where am I? How am I sitting? How am I standing? How am I walking? Am I maintaining that stability the whole time?
Yeah. No, that's usually where I try and start with people. Is try and figure out, okay, are they doing something that we can make a small change on? Because just changing something that small, if that can lead them to having decreased pain or decreased inflammation, or help us, because I remind clients of this all the time. I see them between 1 and 3 times a week. So I get them between 1 and 3 hours. That's it. The rest of the time during the week, 160 some odd hours, 165 to 167 hours, they're on their own.
Exactly. It's up to them.
It's up to
Right?
them.
It's up to them.
So I can't, constantly be on them. It has to come from them. So the exercise that we do is going to help strengthen it. But sometimes everything that they do outside of here is erasing what we're doing in the studio. So I want them to become more aware of what are they doing, have them take some responsibility. And I find that is a key, especially in this, is having them take some responsibility of what they're doing. Because a lot of times I hear clients say, well, that's just how I drive.
Right. Or that's just how I stand.
Right. And
or that's just how I sit.
And if you want to continue to be in discomfort and pain, feel free. But if you want to make a change, let's do it in small amounts. And when I say small amounts, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here. I've had some clients who are OCD, and they will go overboard. You tell them to do 10 reps, they'll do 100.
My type A's.
Yes. And if you tell them, okay, I need you to be more conscious of your glutes when walking, they will walk in every single step to squeeze their butt. That's like, look, that's going to cause dysfunction beyond belief.
That's
so it's slight awareness. So again, as I'm sitting here in my chair, if you see me shift around, it's because sometimes I do realize, oh, my feet aren't really sitting flat on the floor. Okay. So I'll shift my body weight and I let it go. I correct, I let it go. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Then I find myself in a little bit of a position again. I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta. And it's just creating that awareness that they can be reminded of every so often, which is why I like alarms, or in a car, every stoplight. In a car, every stoplight, do you feel both cheeks of your butt in the chair equally? Or do you feel like you're leaning on one side? Just that awareness can make a huge difference in getting that person toward what we need. And then what we do with that hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, whatever you're working with them, can make a much bigger difference because they're not erasing everything that we've been trying to accomplish.
Right. And then you can also reinforce, like, I'm thinking of several of the clients, like then I reinforce that positive behavior through the whole session. So we may be doing a wide variety of arm work and leg work and all kinds of different things, but in each exercise, the first thing is, like, the first check-in is, where is your pelvis? Where are your sit bones? Are you engaged in whatever way we've discovered works? And then do your exercise, even if it's an unrelated area of the body. Right. And then just reinforce that, trying to make that become, again, a habit in every position that they're in: standing, sitting, lunging, lying down, lying prone, side lying, whatever position they're in, reinforcing that same concept. So we just kind of keep driving that home of keeping that stable. Now, when I start to look at working with clients with this, so again, one of them is identifying posture and identifying those things. And that may take you a little while. Your clients often show you their best behavior when they're moving in your studio. And you don't always see the funky stuff that they do when they're distracted and they're not paying attention. They're at their desk or they're at their job, whatever that is. So first, looking at that, looking at posture, looking at habit. But the other thing is, I have a very simple test that is kind of the first thing I often do with somebody with SI joint issues. And this is basically, I do two things. I do a simple bridge, and I do a bridge 2 ways, actually 3 ways. I do a bridge that is basically parallel with something between the knees. So ball, a liner, whatever, all right? Something between the knees or between the lower thigh, squeezing. So they're getting some adduction along with that bridge. And I say, okay, so, and I may even exaggerate that and have them have the feet wide and the knees in, so that they're internally rotated at the same time. Right. And I'll say, okay, so, and then just do a bridge with that, very simple bridge. Usually I'll do a round back bridge because that's more destabilizing for the low back. A flat back bridge, you get more of the erector spinae connected and you actually stabilize. So I want them to kind of just do it as an articulated bridge so that they get the maximum amount of mobility there. So I try that. And then I also try it the opposite. So usually with a band around the thighs, maybe the feet together, the legs slightly turned out, can be minor, but just a little more turned out or wider legs turned out, and pressing up from there.
Yep.
And those two things will tell me something. One is if they're internally rotated and adducted, that in my experience slightly, and again, I'm using this in quotes, opens the SI joint.
Yes.
Right, gives more space for that. And if that feels better, then I often know that I need to actually work on those postures. I need to work more on adduction. I need to work more on basically internal rotation or neutral to try to decrease pressure into the SI joint. That's more common in my experience with arthritis and those kind of things around the SI joint than just straight instability. If, on the other hand, somebody feels like much more comfortable when they're slightly laterally rotated and slightly abducted, that usually says that the SI joints need to be a little bit more closed. In that case, I tend to focus more on lateral rotation, external rotation of the hips, glute strength, that kind of thing. So that's sometimes just a nice quick screening tool for me that will send me down two different paths in terms of how I'm going to focus the rest of the session.
Nice. Nice. A lot of times what I try and start with, you had mentioned the piriformis. What I find is oftentimes the sacrum is, let's just say, not in perfect alignment. It's usually skewed to one side or the other. And sometimes that can be because one piriformis is overly tight, sort of pulling on one side, tightening up that one SI joint. And the other side is a little bit more gapped, a little bit more open. And that muscle is usually more stretched. It's not as taut. So I like to start with release work. I like to start with using a small ball, soft, not super squishy, but a little bit soft, has some give to it.
Not a handball.
Not a handball, not a lacrosse ball, nothing that's going to cause.
Like, and I also say a little bit bigger. So I often start with like a 4 or 5 inch kind of playground-y ball thing that's got some squish to it. Not a tiny little hard one. Yeah.
Yep. And what I find is when I do them, and sometimes you can find them in like 1 pound weights, so 1 pound ball weights, and I just overinflate them slightly so that they have some firmness to it. And I have them sit on one glute when they're sort of lying a little bit on their side. And the lateral translation of the body puts a little bit more weight directly onto the piriformis. And I just have them sit there, find a hot spot, relax on it. Sometimes I'll have them do a little internal and external rotation of the knee just so we can get a little bit of stretch and release. And I have them find 3 hot spots and then switch cheeks, do the other side. What I find happens when we do that is one side usually is really, really overly like, oh my gosh. And the other side, they're like, I feel it, but it's not painful. But one side is, as soon as they're on it, you can see their eyes and you say, okay, if it's too painful, back off a little bit, find a position that's tolerable. But I will say this to a person, after a session or two, that becomes their go-to because it's something that they can do at home. It's like massage. If you've ever had a glute massage, it feels incredible. Not always at the time, but afterwards, things feel released and you feel, wow, I can move a little bit better. So I like to start with sort of a blank canvas. I like to start them with that first. Then I like to go into my bridges. And if they do have an unstable pelvis in any way, shape, or form, I try and keep them bilateral for a while. Because when you get into unilateral things, what you're going to find is that instability will sometimes rear its ugly head and become more unstable.
And awareness is much, much harder.
Much harder.
If they're trying to figure out what's happening with their pelvis, as soon as you put them in like a 1 leg forward, 1 leg back stance, I find they lose awareness too. So bilateral symmetry is really helpful for a while.
Yep. And like you said, a while. I will keep them there for a period of time. And it may be, and everybody is different. So I'm not going to tell you it has to be 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 3 weeks. Everybody's a little different. And usually what it'll be is you'll stick with bilateral for quite a while. And then it's sort of like, okay, let's try this. like a step up. I love step ups for this because everybody has stairs in their life, some way, shape, or form, or a curb, something you got to step up, and you're only going to do one leg at a time. So it's an easy way that I can start a 4-inch step or a 6-inch step, something small, shorter than a regular step up, and begin to get them into doing that a little bit and see how they tolerate something very simple. So, and I'm also getting them in an upright position. That sometimes can be helpful, but it's also reminding them of something that's functional in their everyday life. So it's not going to be something like a one-legged bridge, for instance, which for a body weight may be too intense. It puts a lot of torque on the pelvis, if you're not stable in your core as well. But they do stairs all the time, so it's something very familiar. So they don't think of it as unilateral. So they don't have that immediate, I shouldn't do that. It's just like, oh, okay. So I try and do that. It's almost sneaking up on the problem and see how they respond.
For me, that's like 3 steps down the road.
Okay.
Right. So if I'm going to do unilateral stuff, I tend to put that off a bit. So and again, they have to do that in regular life. So I may do some of that, but I like to start with bilateral symmetry. I like to start with things like in Pilates land, footwork, in personal training land, squats, right? So I think of those as being somewhat equivalent situations. And starting with that, and basically if I have, and this takes a little bit of time, can often take 3 or 4 sessions to figure out whether they prefer, again, that adduction bias or an abduction bias. So again, I will, so I'll start first, maybe with my bridging, I think that they prefer an adduction bias. I will put something. Now, this actually gets very specific. What I found with a few clients with SI joint instability and also with like maybe some femoral instability, if I put something right above their knees, the classic ball above the knees scenario, and they squeeze into that ball, that can, and again, this is a little bit of an image, but it seems to be true, that can open up the femurs. Right? If you squeeze at the bottom, you can basically be levering the top out a little bit. So for some of my clients, that does not work in terms of stabilizing them. So with those clients, I'll actually put them basically like a folded towel or a rolled up, sticky mat or something like that, very high up, like really right below the pelvis, in between the upper thighs, so that they're actually are trying to squeeze the femurs together at the top, because that, in my thinking, will most directly push the femoral heads into the acetabulum and get that force to go into the SI joint and stabilize it. So I'll have them work with that on footwork. I'll have them work with that, like even with feet-in straps. We may not do anything very wide, or we might work to it, but basically still, again, bilaterally symmetrical, some of them just straight up and down. Maybe just working in parallel, maybe starting to play with external rotation, but still with that adduction bias. Footwork on the chair, pull-ups on the chair, hamstring 3, lots of different names for that, pikes. Anything where they really are having to get that deep upper adduction, pelvic floor, core connection. That's something I'll really focus on with those clients who prefer internal rotation. With my other clients that really need that glute strength and that external rotation, I'll do the opposite. So I may have them have a band around the thighs for all those exercises we just mentioned. So that slight pressure out for them, again, around the knees, may bring the femurs in, but it also may just strengthen the whole external rotation strength piece. And I work with that.
Right. And I want to be clear. I do not start people on standing exercises. I prefer more starting supine. Bridges are my go-to with this, as well as doing some core work, but I try and do more bilateral core work. Even I find leg lowers where your toe touches, where you're doing one leg at a time, may create some instability. So I won't even do that, but I can do something isometric for the core in a supine position where their feet are supported for some people or not, knees right over the navel, and grab a big ball like a togu ball or a big beach ball, put it up against the thighs, and then they're going to push into that, pushing the knees into the ball, pushing their hands into the ball, sort of meeting in the middle, creating some, I call it a no flex crunch, because I don't want to see any flexion, but they're still getting that motion trying to push together. So we're creating some abdominal strengthening. And if I want to get a little bit of a more of a oblique, you could push one leg and the opposite hand a little bit more than the other. You can begin to, adjust that as you see fit. But I prefer to start with supine exercises. The thing that I would also add to your adduction with the ball, I always put the ball up higher almost on everybody. I like using a somewhat flattened larger ball, because there's more surface area. When it's slightly flattened and they squeeze, it takes up pretty much from just below the pelvis toward the knee, so they can feel their entire thighs squeezing it. So they get that pulling in.
Right. So it's doing this instead of doing this. So what I just did was just bring like my whole forearms together, as opposed to the upper just coming together, the lower widening, or the other way around. Right. So it's like the whole femur is pulling to the midline.
And the other thing I would add to that, I love that you have them internally rotate their feet. I will have them push through the big toe more than the rest of the foot.
Yeah.
That definitely focuses more on internal rotation of the femurs. And the cue that I give, I rarely will tell them to squeeze the ball. What I'll usually say is bring your knees down and in, because that gets more of that internal rotation instead of just squeezing. Because I find sometimes when they just squeeze with all their might. When you say down and in, they get that internal rotation. And then I will say, okay, really connect with the ball now, and get them to start thinking about doing that. But really the down and in gets that internal rotation, then connection with the ball gets both internal rotation and adduction combined. Then we can and then push through the big toe. There's a lot going on there, but when you get them to start doing that, they feel it in a way they've never felt it before. So those are just a few cues that I try and use.
Now this gets to that, like this is the level of subtlety that I have to work at with my SI clients, is like helping them to feel it. So enhancing their proprioceptive awareness of where they are in space and what's happening and what's going on is critical. And then having them again have to take that into their everyday life. Other things that I work on sometimes, so that's that adduction piece. If instead it really is more of an abduction piece. So one of the things that Karen Klippinger said a million years ago was that when she works with SI joints, she strengthens the gluteus medius like mad to create that kind of stability. Now, I'm going to step back 1 minute, because one of the things that I found with a lot of my SI joint clients is that tightness of the piriformis, and often concomitantly a tightness of the whole IT band on that same side, oftentimes means that like I can't always directly strengthen that area. Like for example, I think of a lot of clients where, taking Karen's advice is like, okay, let's do some side leg lifts, or let's do some, basically side leg lifts of various kinds. And what I found was that would irritate the heck out of that area. That would just cause like an immediate flare up when we would be, in pain for days. So that's where, like with a lot of SI people, I've got to start at the very beginning in terms of strengthening, particularly the piriformis, and even sometimes the whole glute chain, like glute max, glute medius, abduction, like all of that stuff, external rotation. Sometimes I've really got to start like at the very beginning with that very, very, very gentle, very like just lying on the mat, opening and closing the legs, for example.
Exactly.
With your legs fully supported. So there's not really a lot of gravity or resistance there. Clams can sometimes be the absolute nightmare for these clients. And if it's not the right timing yet for them to do a clam, it can just kill them. One way that I found is helpful on that is things like side lying leg work on the trap table, or the tower of the Cadillac, because then essentially they're using their inner thighs. They can be turned out, but they're having support, right, to go up into external rotation, right? Because it's resisted coming down. So they're resisting the adduction, but the abduction is actually supported by the strap. So playing with internal and external rotation, but again, starting at whatever level you need to decrease in flare-ups, basically, is a problem.
Something I'm going to add to that, something that I've used. What I find is that the stabilizing muscles are always the weakest. Our mobilizing muscles, the ones on the outside, are usually our strong muscles, and we
Yeah.
tend to forget about the internal ones. I will do a simple knee fall out exercise.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things I teach them. But the
Yeah.
trick to it is to go slow.
Yeah.
So they're lying on their back, supine position, feet roughly in line with their ischiotuberosities, just in line with their hips. And slowly I'll have them take one knee and just drop it out toward the side and try not to
With
move their pelvis.
control.
With
With
control.
control. Right. That's the slow thing. Because they can just go funk and then the whole
Right.
pelvis rotates. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all about, and I'll tell them half that speed. Now
Yeah.
half that speed.
Yeah.
Until it's shaking. They're going so slow that I can actually see it vibrating. I call it chattering. As
Yeah.
it's chattering to the side, and I only let them go as far as they can without their pelvis moving and then have it come back up. When they're chattering like that, really, that's when you're getting those stabilizing muscles working because they don't know what's going on. They're trying to figure it out too. Their muscles are going, what do you want me to do? And again, slowly, no resistance. Gravity is actually helping as the knee goes out, and then bring it back in while keeping the other knee perfectly stable. Don't let it float out to counterbalance. And I'll stay on one side for whatever my repetition range is, usually higher reps, then I'll do the other side. But what I find is, like you said, there's no resistance except for its own body weight. And the slower they go, the more they get out of it.
Yeah. That's a good one.
The more they get out of it, and it does teach that external rotation. And because gravity's helping with it coming down, guess what? The piriformis doesn't get grouchy because it's not trying to
Right.
lift anything.
Right.
But all the other internal and external rotating muscles are helping out. They're trying to do their job. And sometimes they need to be reminded of what their job is. And then if I want to, 2 weeks from now, a month from whenever they're ready, I put the lightest band humanly possible. I have a long yellow band. It is so light, it's almost nothing. I put it around their knees and I'll have them do it with that. Or I'll have them do bilateral. So if they're not unilateral, I'll have them do bilateral. And then that does work. And I find it works almost to a person that they're able to begin to get those muscles firing without overloading it, without the larger outside muscles trying to take over.
Yeah.
And it wakes up those internal and external rotators quite a bit.
Yep. That's awesome. So again, this is kind of where we go. And honestly, I will work with those principles for a while. And again, so you're starting to work with unilateral, right? That's a really nice, simple way to get to some unilateral stuff.
Yep.
I find again that bilateral is my go-to to start. And when I get into unilateral, I start very, very slowly and carefully.
And small ranges of motion.
And small ranges of motion and awareness.
Yes.
Right. Slow.
Awareness.
Like, what am I doing? Is my pelvis still stable or have I let it drop to the side? And then trying to get those pieces going. One little thing. So that's awesome. And basically this is how it goes, I think, for both of us, is the release work. Gently strengthening adductors, internal rotators, abductors, external rotators, getting the whole hip stronger in a way that doesn't irritate things.
Yep.
And that's often too where, to get back to what I said earlier, it's like, where is their compensation? It's often the piriformis. So again, release work and then very, very, very gradual strengthening.
Mm-hmm.
I also find the whole lateral system. So again, the IT band down on through the lateral hamstring, down on through the lower leg. So if I've got an overactive area that is trying to stabilize it, we talked about the piriformis, but let's say it's the whole lateral leg, that's where that adduction can be really helpful. So, it's one client I'm thinking of is like literally from her hip on down, that whole lateral leg is like completely trying to do the stabilizing for her. Mm-hmm. So in her case, we work on adduction on that leg. And really, so we started some single leg adduction work on that leg with a very, very light spring on the trap table and just bringing that leg down and letting it float up, bringing that leg down, letting it float up. Mm-hmm. We'll slowly build up that single leg adduction work on that side so that we can basically get balance on the two sides of the leg and stop that overwork of that whole lateral side.
And I think something that I just want to put out here, and you and I have said this a few times already, but I want to make sure that everybody understands it. We start very slowly and very small. I think that's the key. Far too often, we have a tendency to want to push people because, let's face it, we get bored too. I mean, it just, it's part of us. We want to get people stronger. We want to do more. And when you see them getting stronger, sometimes people will take a big swing. You need to take the smallest swings possible. Each step is sort of a micro step,
Yeah.
because again, we said this in our last ones, when you're working with SI joint dysfunction, when you find their box that they're safe in, that you can sort of, and I don't want to use the word they're locked down, but they're within that box and their range of motion is under control and everything's working and they're out of pain. Sometimes people say, great, now we can and do something else that's harder. And sometimes it's all about taking that box from being a 1-inch square to being a 1.0001 inch square. It's the small increasing of the box of where they are. You want to start out small range of motion, light resistance. And it's going to take a while. But I find that that's how I get success with this, is by allowing time to just take its time.
And finding for me what works and then working the heck out of what works.
Yep.
Right. So, if you discover that they can do, let's say the little mini clams you were talking about, right? Right. Or whatever, the little, leg fallouts, basically, right? If they can do that very gently, then can they do 10? Can they do 15? Can they do 20?
Yep.
Right. Can they do 25? Maybe can they do 30 without resistance? Then we add resistance. We do 10. We do 5. We do 15. And then slowly build that up. And then, okay, then now maybe we're going to go on to a sideline clam. Maybe we do it with a little bit of support. So we have a small range of motion. Maybe have a pillow between the knees. So they're starting halfway there and they just go tiny range up. Then we make that pillow a little smaller, right? It's like that kind of very stepwise progression is critically important here. It really is not like, oh, you're out of pain. Great. Let's boom, let's go into doing a whatever it is.
Walking lunges. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's usually not going to support the situation. It really is like, okay, find it, stabilize it, teach them how to stabilize it, make that part of their habit, get that stabilization positions as strong as possible first. Then once that's really stable and you really kind of have confidence in it, then you gradually add the unilateral work. You gradually add a step up and then a bigger step up and then a lunge and then, walking lunge. You kind of slowly build them up. But taking, again, it's such baby steps for this.
Yeah. And even getting them to do a squat of some sort, sometimes body weight can be too much. So using the reformer and doing footwork, or I have MVP shuttle, which is very similar. It's elastic band resistance, but I can de-weight them to 5 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
So literally they're pushing off on nothing. And then you take it up slowly so that it's light resistance. And sometimes they'll say, this is too easy. Okay, let's do 25.
Exactly.
Let's just keep going. Okay, you're ready to go up another little increment, a little increment until they're able to do more weight. Then I like to do stand up and sit downs. And I'll start them high. I have a high-low table. Start them high.
So they're barely touching down. Touch and goes, I call them. Touch and goes, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And you start them there and you can slowly lower the table. Or what I've done, if I have a stationary table, is I get those thick pads, the balance pads, and just stack a couple of those. And then over time, you pull one away. So that they can feel, oh, I'm going a little bit lower. Great. Little bit lower until they're able to go down to roughly 90 degrees or whatever a chair is at home, their office chair or something that they're going to use regularly, and get them to that point where they can do 15, 20, 30 repetitions there and think, wow, yeah, I can do this and I'm stable. I don't feel in pain.
Right.
So again, it's starting small and working our way there inch by inch. Because you're going to get there. If you continue to move forward, you will get there. It just may take a while. And that's okay. We're not in a rush.
No, and this is just major major core work, major awareness work, major balance work. Once you've discovered an area that is problematic, then you play with, okay, let's work on that area. And this is out that unlayering, right? You'll find like, okay, we've got that piece managed. What's our next piece?
Yes.
So maybe again, like in many of my clients, I start with the piriformis, trying to get that under control, because when that's a mess, sciatica happens. It's just, everything's a mess. So if I can get that kind of managed, then I start to say, okay, what else is happening? Oh, their abductors are really weak. Okay, let's start generally working on that. Or they're compensating with a lot of tightness on one adductor, right? Or their slings are really imbalanced in their torso. And I'll start to work on rotational components or that kind of thing. One thing that I was playing with a client, which I think is part of this too, is before I even do unilateral work, I will do rotational work with a stable pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
So I start to work on just keeping the pelvis is stable, both sit bones are anchored, whatever it is, whether you're doing it with bands or you're doing it with like the straps on the reformer, whether you're doing it on a tower, whatever you're doing, but basically, with or without resistance, slowly adding resistance into that, because that's going to help to get the upper part of the system working, right? The slings working to try to balance the forces through the pelvis from the top. And I start with that slow, whatever works for them. And I notice what the differences are. And I try to work into more mobility on the tight, on the less mobile side. And can they keep their pelvis stable? So as things start to develop, I'll also put them onto the chair. This again in Pilates environment. I'll put them onto the chair, which is, it's a seat with two pedals. I'll split the pedals and have them do alternating. So one leg down, one leg up. So basically they're doing like a seated march is essentially what that is, with some resistance from the bottom. And what I'll notice, and I'll have them notice, is putting their hands around the top of their pelvis. They can feel how when that leg goes up, so when that knee goes up or the hip goes into flexion, that pelvis usually rolls back just a titch. And then as the leg goes down, that pelvis on that same side rolls forward just a titch. And that's normal. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I don't want it to be 100% lock and load. But then what they'll find is like, okay, one side only rotates forward and one side only rotates back, for example. Right. And then I'll say, okay, so let's think about keeping that one from rotating back. For example, I'll choose one to decide it's like the one that I want to model. And I'll say, okay, so see if when you lift that leg up now, if you cannot let that pelvis roll back as far, for example, on that side. So that's that kind of awareness of what is the pelvis doing in a alternating, contralateral leg motion or reciprocal leg motion. And that's a way to create some awareness there that I found is useful. Then we take that same idea up to walking. Right? And just have the hands around the pelvis and just feel that rotation and see if they can balance that out a bit. See if they can actually kind of move their pelvis in a more balanced way on the two sides. So that's another little tip that I sometimes play with.
Now we covered the lower, below our pelvis. I also do a lot of core work. A lot of core work. Now, I'm not a huge fan of crunches and things like this, especially for someone who's unstable in that area, because they may have other instabilities that have not reared their ugly head yet. So I want to make sure that they're stable first. I had mentioned earlier about a no flex crunch, and what I mean by that, and I've been doing this for years, and I just started calling it this and didn't even realize that it was done in Pilates. I was doing this in fitness for a long time, because I actually, the way we had our table set up, our mat table, the table that we did exercises on, had a bar above their head as they're lying down, and I could put a band or a tube on that bar and then have their hands start directly over their chest and bring their hands down toward their thighs with resistance. And what they found was they didn't have to do a crunch, but they definitely felt their core engaging a lot. And then I could have them elevate their knees or put their knees on a ball and curl the ball in at the same time, bilateral. Again, all of this is bilateral with the lower extremities. And then I realized, in Pilates, you do it on the trap table with the springs. And
or supine arm work on the reformer.
Or supine arm work on the reformer. All of that really does work. And it's a great way that you're not doing a crunch, but you're definitely getting those abdominals engaged, and you need to strengthen your core. For an unstable SI joint, the core needs to be strong, coming from all sides. So I find that this is a safe way to introduce this, before I even try and have them do anything seated, like a seated statue or, you know, anything like that. It's a safe way that they can begin to feel their core, feel it fire. And I can even get some crossing work going by one arm at a time, especially if I'm using a tube or a spring. And it's just a way to get those muscles firing and getting those oblique slings firing together, and then one at a time in a crossing action.
And that's so I love those, all the supine arm work stuff, and just how far are the knees in, right? How much hip flexion will often determine how much core work is happening. Because there you have to lift the legs up. So it's like bring the knees in and then take them out just to where you feel the core has to work, and then play with, you know, the arm work. Another option is all the kneeling arms, or the kneeling abdominals, facing back, facing front. Again, everything bilateral first, and then maybe you take one leg out behind you. So you're still trying to keep all your 4 points together, but you've got one leg up and you're doing basically one leg hip flexion, for example. And playing with some of the single leg work on that one particularly can be helpful to build that up and get the core working. And when you add a leg lift, it's asymmetrical working, right? Then you've got different slings that have to work there.
I want to throw something out here, and you might find this controversial, okay? But it's something that I've worked with my SI joint people, and I find it works really well. In the world of abdominals, a lot of people say, well, crunches are terrible because, you know, it's put too much pressure on the spine, but we still need a forward flex. Yes, absolutely. I do believe in that, especially an unweighted forward flex. Well, a lot of times we'll do that on all fours, right? We can do cat and cow and all of that.
Yep.
What I've done for the SI joint is on all fours, I'll take one knee slightly forward and that same hand slightly forward, and just have them rock forward and back. And what it does is it provides a mobilization of the SI joint, and the hips are going to look like they're walking. They're literally going to look like they're twisting side to side. And again, I start with the knee an inch in front of the other knee.
Nice.
Small.
Love it. Yep.
Then you can increase it. And one side may feel better than the other. So sometimes the side that's a little stickier won't feel as good. So maybe I'll work on that a little bit more because they may need more mobilization on that side. So I'll do 2 sets on that side to 1 set on the other side, just to see how they look until it can feel equal. The people who had unstable pelvises, I got to tell you, this becomes one of their go-tos to do at home when they don't feel, you know, I'll have them do the adduction work, but I'll have them do this as well. And it's unweighted mobilization. So they're not doing something that's going to really provide a lot of movement, but enough just to get a little bit of that normal motion going in those SI joints.
I love it. That's great. That's great. Especially because very often the issue is not just that one side is unstable, but the other one is not moving enough.
Exactly.
Right. And it's actually that contralateral, that imbalance between the two that's causing the trouble. It's not just that one's unstable, it's that the other one isn't moving. So if you can get that sticky one to get a little bit more mobility, oftentimes that will just calm things down, because then again, things can work a little bit more in a balanced way. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. So just a thought. That's all. So
I like it. No, I like it. So again, this is like we said, a bit of a shotgun. These are all kinds of little funny things we've tried that have been successful over time. One other thing that I've been playing with recently, and I'm thinking of one client particularly who was having real trouble standing. You know, she's a Pilates teacher, so she stands like all day, as we do, as personal trainers do. And what she found was, you know, like standing with both legs in the same plane underneath her was causing that compensation to happen on that side, right? Because over time, the stability muscles fatigue and whatever the compensations are would show up, and she'd get sort of this whole pain. And I said, okay, so play with putting one foot slightly in front of the other. In other words, just changing gently the force that's going through the whole structure in the standing position. And, you know, we'll see how this goes. I've been playing with it a bit with some other clients as well. And it's been interesting. It's actually made a big difference for many of my clients who have trouble with standing. And it's not something we'd usually do, right? Where I was like, put both your feet underneath you. But if you've got that imbalance, sometimes if you just shift it, and I'll say, okay, so start with client 1, have your right foot half a foot in front. And with your next client, have the left foot half a foot in front. So again, just those forces are going differently through the legs into the pelvis, into the spine. And that's been interesting to play with too.
No, I like that. I was thinking of something that I've done too in situations like that, are just small hip circles to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, where they're just circling, you know, like imaginary hula hoop, but going slow and just feeling what's going on within the joints of the hips. Circle in one direction a few times, circle in the other, because what it's really doing is that SI joint is moving a little bit. So it's providing a little bit of motion. So again, and sometimes that's all we need, a little bit. I'm not asking you to do something huge. No.
And it doesn't move much anyway. I mean, it's at its best, it doesn't have a lot of mobility, but to have some can be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, these are all just a few tips and tricks, taking the theoretical, making it more practical, and what we've worked with in the past. And again, what works with client A may not work for client B, may work with client G. Who knows? But sometimes you just got to see what's going to be working. And when you find that thing, write it down. And like you said, work it into the ground. I mean, that's kind of what you need to do, because you're going to get stronger. They will get stronger. It's just going to take time. But when you find a safe exercise, stick with that. Stick with it for a period of time as they're getting stronger. Yeah.
Work on their habit. Start slow. Really pay attention to what flares up. That's been my best teacher all the way along. Is it's like, you know, we're going along, things are going well, things are getting better. We add something. I add one thing at a time.
One. That's it.
Like seriously, if anything I think could be potentially problematic, I add one thing. How do they feel that day, the next day, the day after? No problem. Felt great. Then we're going to keep it. If we got a flare up, that tells me something. Like it may be okay. We added like a step up on the chair, right? Or we added something like that. Something kind of they really contort the pelvis. All right, we've got to pull that down. How do I regress that? And it's always knowing how to regress something and then move it forward. So keeping it small, keeping it simple, working the heck out of whatever pattern seems to be bringing them pain relief and comfort and control, and then slowly adding things into their program.
And I love the one at a time. I tell that all the time.
Yeah.
We learned that, you know, in school. We did research. Too many variables, you don't know what's caused the change.
Right. But for better or for worse.
Right. One variable at a time. And when you find that that does work, I won't add another variable in there for a little while. And the reason I say this is sometimes it takes a while before, if that variable is going to bother them, it may take 2 or 3 sessions. It may not be one time. But after the 3rd or 4th, they say, man, it's feeling almost worse. I say, okay, let's pull that back. Let's do a micro regression.
We go another way. Right.
Right. But you try and hold that one until you know it works. When you know it works, then add one more thing in. It's not, okay, I see them 3 times this week, so on Monday, we're going to try this. And if Tuesday they're not in pain, we're going to try this on Wednesday. No. One thing, try it for a while. How is their body responding? Positively, negatively? And if it's positive, cool. Add something else. If it's negative, okay, change directions a little bit. Exactly.
So again, this has been a little all over the map, but hopefully you've gotten just maybe some ideas, maybe some tricks to work with either yourself or your clients. If you've got any cool things to add, things that you know have worked for you, or information to increase this conversation, feel free to put that in the comments. You know, on Instagram or on our Facebook. It's always really nice to get comments. And if you've got anything to say, you know, SI joint for me is a mystery. It's a learning process for me, for sure. For my clients, for sure. And it's not as straightforward as many of the other things we've talked about, where it's like, okay, if I do this, this, and this, I get, 80% of the time I get good results. And the other 20% of the time, I just got to like refine it a bit. This is like, let's see where we can go. So anyway,
I like it.
That's our things for today. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Hopefully you guys took something out of this that you can put into practical application with your clients immediately. Even if it's not someone with necessarily an SI joint dysfunction, it may be an exercise you're like, ooh, I never thought about trying it like that. Try it. see how their body responds, see how your body responds. You may find that, hey, that worked better than what I've been doing. So cool. Now you have another modification. So hopefully we gave you a couple of tips and tricks, and hopefully for your clients who do have unstable SI joints, you can help them along, get them into a better place. That's really what our goal is with this talk today. As always, if you like what we're doing, please hit the like and subscribe button. Follow us so every week. It comes right into your inbox for your podcast, so you can listen to it. movingconvos@gmail.com. If you have any comments, if you want to tell us what works for you, we'd love to hear that. We'd love to hear that, so we could even learn from this as well, because I learn from Nora each week, but I'd love to learn from you guys too. That if there's something out there, please share with us that here's something that I like and that has worked for me in the past. So movingconvos@gmail.com is how to get in touch with us. And again, check us out on social media. So all of our updates, whenever we're going to be on the road, will be there. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.